This tall hedge of Nellie Stevens holly is an illustration of a problem that's developing as people try to solve one of their needs in the modern urban landscape. With properties shrinking and neighbors getting closer together, we're needing more and more hedges in our landscaping, and people are very concerned about screening of their properties, both commercial and private. And a wide variety of plants are being used for this purpose, and they do the jobs, but sometimes they create problems that we have to figure out new ways to solve. The hedge that you have just seen is Nellie Stevens holly, and it's one of the very best of hollies for this area. There are other plants that are used for hedging, like Leyland cypress, a conifer that grows very fast. But one of the things with these plants is that most people end up buying plants because they need so many of them for a hedge to look for a price that's very cheap on these to be able to afford that long planting. Well, when you come down to that kind of a situation, you're generally confronted with the problem that if it's going to be cheap, it probably has had to be fast growing for the nurseryman to get it to you in that stage. And plants, unfortunately, just don't stop at 4 feet or 7 feet or 10 feet as you might desire your hedge to be. In this case, it's up to 20 feet, and if we leave it, it will continue to grow even taller. We've confronted this problem at the NC State University Arboretum in our trials in that we had a massive 400-foot long hedge behind our perennial border that had gotten so large that it was out of scale to the border, and then also began to be competitive with the roots from all this planting coming out and competing with our perennials. So what we'd like to show you is an answer that's a little frightening when you first see it, but then we'll show you where this will take you to in your landscapes. People often want to make their hedges smaller, and let's show you how to do that. And if we'll back up just a little bit, you'll see here what we've done this spring at the Arboretum. We've taken this hedge down to a height that we would like to have it for a hedge and taken the sides off to pull them back in because we were losing 4 or 5 feet of growth here on the back of the border. It looks really, really drastic and has the impact of sometimes upsetting people a great deal. I'll show you in a few minutes how this can change and how fast it will come back to you. The key thing when you're taking a planting back like this is, first of all, make sure you know the kind of plants. Some things, like some of the conifers, if you cut back into a pine or some old junipers, they simply won't grow out. But broadleafed evergreens, like hollies and bayberries and other such plants, will flush out again and very, very quickly. But the important thing to realize is that when the new growth comes out, it will come out wherever you make the cut, within 2 or 3 inches of that. So if you want branching back in here, you have to make the cuts back there, not out here at the tip. This will branch at this height, not down here in the bottom. So in some cases, it's a good idea just to go back very heavily, maybe 2 or 3 feet high, and let it branch. It'll depend on what you want to have happen. So this is what we've just done this spring in the Arboretum. And I'd like to take you over here and we'll show you a hedge that was done this way a year ago. 1 year after the pruning that you saw earlier, we have a hedge back again. No longer looks like the site of a nuclear blast with all of those bare stems sticking out. We're back at this point almost exactly a year after the original pruning was done here at our perennial border. And not only have we filled in the sides of this, the top has grown so much in the last year that we came back in through the winter months and took 3 feet off the top of it to more or less even it out into a formal hedge. We were able to get nearly 6 feet of growth back on this one hedge in 1 year. And of course the reason for that is the massive root system that was still there, pulling all of the water and nutrients in to give us much faster growth than you would normally get on small plants in the landscape. Now, that brings a second issue in that there's 2 kinds of prunings that you can do on plants. One is, of course, the top. Roots are also an issue. Normally, you might like to leave all of those there to speed that growth. But we had a second issue in this case. Part of the reason why we took this hedge back was that this massive growth had filled our perennial border with competing roots. They're taking water, they're taking nutrients, and this is a factor that eventually caused the border to be about half the size it normally should be. So we also, in this case, pruned the roots at the same time on this one side, allowing them to stay on the other side. And that's a very easy process. You can simply rent a line trencher, something like a ditch witch type of machine, and you cut through the ground about 1 foot to 1.5 feet in depth. making sure you don't hit gas lines, pipelines, water lines, all of that sort of thing, and then filling the soil back in. If that's done every 4 or 5 years, that'll help a actively growing bed of annuals and perennials as we have here. A couple of other things about the pruning. You saw rather large cuts, and that's a concern to many people in terms of what was happening at that time. There is a question today, a new one, in terms of painting such wounds, which was the old standard practice. We found that that's really not necessary. In fact, in some kinds of plants, you really don't want to do it. It can even be damaging. So just make the cuts, let them go. The other question that needs to be asked is, what time of year should one do this? In terms of shearing a broadleafed evergreen hedge like this lightly, that can be done any time of year. But where you're going through such a drastic procedure and going to flush back such enormous growth, probably your best time to do it is toward the end of the winter, about the time things are going to break dormancy and start the new growth anyway. If you do it too late in the summer or toward the fall, you'll be having very soft, succulent growth that could be injured as it goes into the winter months. So give it some months to grow through the summer, slow down, acclimate, and get ready for the winter. Again, know the plant that you're dealing with. Broadleafed evergreens you can work with pretty easily. On many of the conifers, if you cut back, as you saw here, into old wood without any leaves or needles on them, they may die. So make sure you know what kind of plant. You can keep most of our hedging materials to the size you so desire with time. Come out, visit the Arboretum, take a look at how it works, and see our continuing evolution of progress on this particular hedge.